Welcome my friend, Seven Gray here. Thank you for joining me for this episode today. Many of you have been making comments in the past several episodes as I've been dealing with tenant damages to my rental properties down in Lakeland, Florida. Why, for $20,000 worth of damages, I'm not pursuing and suing my tenant for those damages. Today, in this episode, I'm going to explain all about that. But first, let's roll the intro. The short answer why I'm not suing the tenant is basically I can't. And there's basically three reasons why I can't sue the tenant. But first, I think it's important to give a little bit of background and explain about why the tenant left and broke the lease, how that sort of happened, and what happened from that time point up until now. Because I think it plays into explaining everything that's happened. So basically, we have on the lease three people. We have the tenant and the tenant's daughter that were actually living in the house itself. And then as a co-signer, you had the tenant's mother. So you have three generations here, the grandmother, the mother, and the granddaughter. And two of those were actually living in the house. So basically what happened was probably, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years into the lease, something like that. The tenant had a personal family crisis, and so the tenant felt threatened for her personal safety and the safety of her daughter and fled the premises. She drives a convertible Mustang, loaded up everything that she could get of her own personal belongings into the car and left the property and left all the furniture inside, all the food, the pots and pans, everything like that. And that also plays into the whole thing that I talked about with the ceiling fan, which I'll link the episode above where I talked about that, and the wires being clipped there and capped, and the ceiling fan being gone. Many of you commented that she stole the ceiling fan. Well, I think that's highly unlikely that she would load up her suitcase with her clothing, get her daughter in the car, load up two dogs in the car, and then decide at the last minute, oh, I need that ceiling fan. I'm going to go remove it and put caps on it, put it in the convertible Mustang with two dogs and my daughter. I just don't think that's highly likely. Anyway, back to what I was talking about with her leaving. So she vacated the premises. She contacted the management company and said that she was going to be financially responsible for any damages and for breaking the lease. But she wanted all contact in the future to go through her mother because she needed to sort of ghost and disappear because of her personal safety. Anyway, I don't know very much about the details of all of that. I'm just trying to be respectful of the tenant in what happened there. And for me, I'm concerned about two things. One, my personal property, and also the financial obligations of the tenant. So this leads into why I'm not suing the tenant. So my management company went in, did an evaluation, and they came up with estimated damages of close to $20,000. I had quotes for all sorts of work to be done through the management company and their contractors exceeding $18,000 with an estimate of possibly another $2,000 on top of that. That provoked me to drive down to Florida and check things out and figure out what in the world is going on. So in progression of events, the management company went in and started by cleaning out the property and doing what they call an initial first clean, which I believe was just mopping the floors, cleaning things out, and spraying for pests. So there's a few things like that, and the tenant paid the management company directly for those activities. So that was part of the financial equation that comes into play here. Then I arrive actually at the property around May 15th, something like that, occupied the property and took over all of the repairs from that point on. So the management company was not involved in the picture for doing repairs from that point forward. And then out of my own pocket from May 15th on, I spent about $4,300 to repair the property. So I would say everything was repaired for in the ballpark of $5,000, not $20,000 like I had been quoted from the management company. But going back to those financial obligations, $4,300 out of my pocket. For that, I contacted the grandmother, as I had been instructed to do, to talk to her about those monetary damages and payment for those. And she agreed to meet with me and make payment in full. And so we got together, we met, I gave her that invoice, explained exactly what work was done. She saw the premises, saw all the work that was done, and agreed to pay for that, and she made payment at that time in full. She also paid for rent during the time that the property was vacated, all the way up through the time until I occupied the property, and she received a credit for the half of the month that I was there occupying the property, which she had already paid rent, which I think is the right thing to do. We also applied the security deposit towards some of those damages. So I consider that bill completely paid in full. The rent was paid in full until I occupied the property. And in a court of law, you can't sue somebody if they've paid all of their bills, paid for the damages, and followed the letter of the law in the situation where a lease is broken. So that is why I cannot sue the tenant for those damages. I will say that some of those damages were actually paid for by the management company because they were directly responsible for some of the damages that were done. Again, that's something that I'm going to address in upcoming episodes. Anyway, that explains why I am not suing the tenant for damages on the property. Well, basically, they paid for all those damages and they paid for the rent. And sometimes life just takes a twist like that, and I think they did the best they could to make things right. So this is a very short episode. Thank you so much for watching. Savor the moment, and I'll see you in a future episode.